Welcome to the Westeros.org video review for the final episode of Season 6, The Winds of Winter. Yes, we have now reached the end of yet another season. In this episode, as you probably have expected, there are going to be some major revelation. Well, one major revelation and quite a few potential spoilers for future storylines in the books. I'll discuss that a little bit more at the end again. See what I think about how they may be reflected in the books or whether they are really showing something that's going to be in the books again. It's hard to say. It's very difficult. So much is different, but some of it, yes, it's definitely showing some shape of future events. I should note as well that this review might be a little briefer than this episode otherwise might have gotten, because by the time you see this, we'll actually be in Northern Ireland. So I've had to do this at a bit of a time pressure to get the file ready so that we can get it uploaded and done before we're off with the flight. So I will be revisiting some of these things in a season overview video, which we will be doing probably sometime at the end of this week or early next week. The episode starts off in King's Landing, and I have to say that it starts off in a really strong way. The music and the direction are central to this, really, and particularly the music. It starts with this very unusual piano piece, completely unlike anything that they've ever done, and it sets a very different mood. And it's superb for this build-up that they're doing as they're going through the preparations for the trial. And as it becomes clear what Cersei's plans are. I mean, they've laid a lot of groundwork for this, you might even say a little too much groundwork in the previous episodes, making it rather plain that something was going to go down in King's Landing that involved wildfire. That it would be quite so momentous, and that quite so many main characters would be gotten rid of. That's a nice slash of the budget there. Was perhaps not known, but certainly that something was going to happen seemed pretty clear. Still, they build it up really nicely, even though you can guess pretty early on what's going to happen. So I thought that was very well directed, a great choice, and one of the most striking passages that they've had on the show, really. The rest of King's Landing, it's pretty well acted, and it is, nicely paced and nicely directed, but that certainly doesn't salvage the fact that some parts of the whole trial setup are, full of holes, like the Loras part in particular. I think that his storyline this season has been, well, it's been rather pointless for a long while. They didn't really do a good job with deciding, oh, he's going to be, somehow they wanted, a second person accused, and at the end here with Cersei for some reason, and they decided to use this as a way of playing out something with the character rather than having him join the Kingsguard and the whole thing. So that whole bit was rather meh, really. It has been all along, and the fact, even though they end it in an otherwise good piece, I wouldn't say that helps salvage it. I would also think that with Cersei, I mean, for the most part, her acting here fits, I think. The one bit that I didn't quite like was that I wish they had played up her being a bit more joyous over destroying the Sept, so that you had a much stronger contrast once she learns that Tommen is dead. Now she doesn't really have that much of an expression change. I mean, that's been a complaint that we've had all along about the way Lena Headey plays Cersei, that there aren't those contrasts between her being joyous, being furious. She's just sort of fairly in middle of the road, and a stronger contrast would have been a nice way to show that she's still grieving over her son's death. Now you kind of start thinking, well, it wasn't that big of a deal for her. She's got her enemies out of the way, and that matters more to her than her son being alive. Once Jaime reaches King's Landing, there does seem to be a bit of that they're finally giving him some doubts about what Cersei has done. At least he doesn't seem entirely thrilled to see her crowned, and she seems rather dismissive of him. I mean, she kind of gives him a a look that seems to say, oh, this is how it is, take it or leave it, and then back to looking out over her new subjects. And speaking of those subjects, I do hope this has some serious ramifications in the next season. We had them earlier on talking about how they couldn't storm the Sept and deal with the Sept or the High Sparrow and the Fate Militant in a violent way, because they'd have, a popular uprising on their hand. They'd have a civil war because the common people support him. How is this not going to happen? Where's the common people? Why aren't they beating down the doors to the Red Keep already? Are they so frightened by the Sept of Baelor blowing up? I mean, there's still a lot of them. Yes, potentially there's more wildfire in King's Landing, but at some point, Cersei's going to be risking her own life if she's sitting in the Red Keep blowing up King's Landing bit by bit. So there has to be some very significant ramifications to this in the next season. Not just from the outside. King's Landing has to be really upset. They certainly don't seem thrilled to have Cersei as their new queen, but there have to be nobles who decide that, we're getting out of here. No way we're supporting this mad woman who just, blew up God knows how many nobles who were in the Sept for this occasion. So yeah, it's hard to say too much about that, but they said before that, this was at risk of a civil war, so there really should be something like that happening in the next season as a following up for Cersei's actions. Next up, the twins. I like the exchange between Walder and Frey and Jaime, as Walder is celebrating that he's finally won and gotten rid of those last pesky Tullys, and now Riverrun is his once again, and things are great. And he tries to get rather chummy with Jaime after a while there. First we have a bit of Jaime and Bronn interaction, with Bronn just being Bronn, and it's kind of supposed to be funny, but I find it mostly tedious. But, Walder Frey, I've liked the portrayal of the character all along, and it really feels right the way he tries to compare himself to Jaime. Like, here we see two Kingslayers. We don't really care that they're sniggering behind our backs because, we're winning. And Jaime really gets quite disgusted about being compared to Walder Frey. Now, this Jaime, of course, shouldn't really be as disgusted as Jaime in the books would be at this time, but it's still, at least we're looking at some appropriate, at least earlier season behavior from Jaime, because he would take that very badly, having that in his face. And then, of course, he puts down Walder in a quite nice way and walks off. If we have to come and rescue you, why do we need you? So that's good. That feels like those two characters. Then, oh no, then it gets really bad. And this is just the first taste of a very, I don't know quite how to describe it, but I'll call it a theft. Obviously they can do whatever they want with George's material, but there are two horrible thefts in this episode. And the first one, or misappropriations perhaps, we get this here when it turns out that, towards the end of the feast, everyone's disappeared or something, and Walder Frey notices this good-looking girl and has her over, and it turns out to be Arya. I don't know if she's supposed to have stolen a few faces when she left the House of Black and White, or if she's gone and murdered some innocent girl to get a face, which doesn't really fit with the Arya who wouldn't even murder Lady Crane as part of her, job. So yeah, I don't know how they want to explain that. But anyway, she has a face, and it turns out that she has been baking Frey pie. Somehow she has managed to carve up Black Walder and Lothar without anyone noticing. I guess she might have murdered all the cooks or something as well, and she's serving it to Walder. Of course, she has to tell Walder what's in the pie, because she wants to have a moment of gloating so that she can reveal herself to be Arya Stark before he dies. Compared to the appropriate usage of the Frey pie moment in A Dance with Dragons, this is incredibly weak. There you have Lord Manderley having managed to serve up phrase to the phrase. And he is not telling anyone about this. He's not telling the reader either. You have to figure that out and realize what's in those huge pies once there are missing phrase. And what's more, Lord Manderley is going for a second helping. That's the clincher. That's that made that so horribly wonderful. I mean, it's disgusting, it's gross, and it's at the same time, it's the North remembers, and he's shown his true colors. Here, I don't know what to call this moment, but it is such cheap reusage. You couldn't get that moment in, so you decide to steal it for another scene, and oh, this is gonna be a cool nod to the books. No, it is not going to be a cool nod to anything. This is salt in the wounds. Just salt in the wounds. Big, deep, stabby wounds full of salt. And it gets worse. Just wait, it'll get worse. And I'll rant about that too. After that, we make a brief stop in Old Town. I do like the look of the high tower, I have to say. It looks quite epic, quite huge, and they've got that stepped construction inspired by the lighthouse on Faroes. I do think that looks nice, so I wouldn't mind seeing more of that next season. Sam's story, well, it doesn't really, I mean, they seem to just want this final scene with him, entering the Citadel and I guess, hopefully with all the bureaucracy out of the way, being accepted to become a maester. They just seem to have wanted some way to sort of wrap his storyline, but they don't manage to do anything to really hint at where he's going next season. He leaves Gilly and the baby outside when or rather, in the foyer or whatever of the Citadel when he's allowed into the library, once the attendant says no women and children. And then we just get Sam staring in awe at this amazing library and having a little bit of a bookgasm there or something. And what are we supposed to take out of it? That he's going to pick this over Gilly, or that he's going to be there for a few weeks reading, finding something awesome, and then he's off again? Is he going to be a maester when they open next season? It's all very ambiguous, and at this point in the story, it feels quite weird to just end at in a way that doesn't really give a good sense of where he's going. Oh, Winterfell, where to start? There are plot holes that you could fly Balerion through in the storyline, and there are inconsistencies all over the place. Inconsistencies with what they've established previously on the show. Not that that is anything new. But, there are so many of them. It starts right away. Jon and Melisandre are talking, and he complains about being seated away from his family during feasts. It happened once, and they even established on the show that this was an unusual occurrence, that he wasn't seated with the family when Robert and Cersei were visiting. And then, basically, you seem like to have the start of the Four Yorkshiremen skit between him and Melisandre. Well, at least you had feasts. That fortunately, when Davos comes in, it is not to add his voice to it about what a terrible childhood he had. Instead, he is there to demand that he gets to execute Melisandre because she's a murderer, she burned Shireen. First of all, why is he asking Jon's leave to execute Melisandre? And then, when Jon inexplicably decides that, well, I guess I can't execute the woman who resurrected me, but I do have to banish her. Who gave Jon the right to banish anyone from the North? I mean, who died and made him, king in the North, or whatever he's supposed to be? It's not like, he's not the Lord Commander or anything like that, so I'm not sure what he is. Oh, I guess he's the guy who was leading the army, but what does that have to do with anything? Why does he think that gives him the right to banish Melisandre? And just the fact that he would decide based on what Davos is saying, when Davos is the one who got Melisandre to resurrect him in the first place, so that Jon should be feeling a little bit obliged to, maybe think about what Melisandre says and realize that it's important. But no, he's gonna go with Davos here. You can't go around burning little girls, so I'm gonna banish you. Never mind what you're saying about being needed. It doesn't gel. Then we get to Jon and Sansa kissing and making up, during which Jon says that, Sansa is the Lady of Winterfell and should have the Lord's Timber. But no, you should take it, Jon. Okay, and what does she say about not having told him about Littlefinger? She says that she should have told him about Littlefinger. But that's it. Yes, you should have, but there's no explanation, because there is no explanation for what Sansa has done or not done. And the whole thing, it just feels wrong. And then you get Sansa and Littlefinger talking, and Littlefinger is revealing what he has wanted all along. Himself on the Iron Throne, with Sansa at his side. She seems a little dubious, him trying to say that, you kind of owe me something now. I've declared for the Starks, for everyone to hear. And she says, well, you've declared for others before, so, you're gonna be fine. And then he starts putting doubts in her head again. Who should the North rally behind? Should it be you, or should it be this motherless bastard born in the South? And she doesn't answer. Again, this seems to be the modus operandi for Sansa this season. Be silent. Don't answer. And mostly it seems to have to do with the fact that the writers probably don't know what she's supposed to answer, because nothing really makes sense. She has just told Jon that she should have trusted him and told him about Littlefinger. So what is she going to tell Littlefinger now? She really should be telling him, don't, stop trying to have me doubt my brother. I don't care that you're saying that he's my half-brother. I love him, and he's Jon, and I'm going to give him the Lord's Chamber, and I'm being really supportive of him. No, she just walks away. I don't think they know what they're doing at all with the character. I definitely need to take a look at her arc. That's going to be one of the things that I hope to do after the season, because there are some serious problems, and, it's only going to get worse in the final Winterfell segment. The Winterfell section ends with a meeting being called between the various lords who took part in the battle, and some of those that weren't there but are now apparently at least thinking about supporting Jon. And the meeting results in Jon being called the King in the North. It's Lyanna Mormont who takes up the call first, and most everyone else, I guess except for Littlefinger, chimes in and declares Jon King in the North. Like, huh? What? It doesn't work. I mean, Jon is standing there saying nothing about the fact that he is usurping, at the very least, Sansa, and he also knows that Bran is alive, or he hasn't at least confirmed his death, so he's probably usurping Bran as well. On the show, they never did anything with Robb thinking about making Jon his heir, or making any preparations to have Jon be declared his heir. So, even if he wouldn't know about that, he doesn't even have that sort of justification in the background. Well, Robb intended to have him as his heir. No, Sansa and Bran are the legitimate heirs. Jon has no business being called King in the North. I mean, he was calling Sansa Lady of Winterfell, or is she supposed to be Lady of Winterfell somehow, and he's supposed to be the King in the North? Lyanna also, Mormont also seems to basically suggest that, well, he's a Stark to me. I don't care that he's a bastard, because she does say that, they don't recognize any other king than King in the North whose name is Stark. And no, he's not being legitimized. Is he supposed to legitimize himself, maybe? They're jumping over a lot of steps here and deciding that, yeah, we can just go and declare him King in the North. Never mind about, for example, the slight detail that up until quite recently, Jon was Lord Commander of the Night's Watch. How did he get out of that? Are none of these lords wondering about that? Did he have Melisandre show that just before we came into the meeting, she had been there, explaining that, yes, he was dead, actually. And that meant that his watch had ended, and then I resurrected him. So it's fine. He's not an oath breaker at all. It's just fine and dandy, and you should all believe me. Maybe she resurrected a rabbit or something to show that she can actually do that. I don't know what to think, but for all these Northern Lords to just accept that, yeah, okay, he used to be in the Night's Watch, but now he kind of isn't, so we'll go and declare him king. I don't get it. And Sansa, she just sits there silent once again, and she says nothing when her rights are taken from her. The most she does, and apparently she doesn't seem to be all that happy about it, because she exchanges a look with Littlefinger at the end. Is she now thinking that Littlefinger was right after all? That, you know, if she had made it more clear to Littlefinger that she, you know, wanted what he wanted, then he would have stood up during the meeting and said, well, what about Sansa? And now, what is she going to do? Is she actually going to side with Littlefinger because she was passed over yet again? But of course, it all has to do with the fact that she never says anything. Just like in the meeting where in the previous episode, where afterwards she complained that Jon didn't ask her anything. Well, Jon hadn't asked Tormund or Davos either. They spoke up. Sansa seems completely incapable of speaking up. But then she's probably going to whine afterwards. It's just horrendous the way they have treated the character, horrendous the way they have forced things in certain directions. Apparently what they wanted out of Sansa this season was for her to feed Ramsay to his dogs, and what they wanted out of Jon was for him to become king in the north. And we are going to get the characters to these points no matter how it actually works out, and we're going to have Sansa just be silent when she can't say something because it would not make sense what she's saying. And of course we have to have her be a little bit upset about being usurped by Jon, but we're just going to have her go off and, you know, plot with Littlefinger on the side or something. It's terrible, and it's probably going to get even worse next season. I can't see any way out of the hole that they have dug themselves with Sansa in particular. Then again, they could just have her fly out of it, you know, on a dragon or something, because, hey, that's what they do, and, you know, they need to fix something up. They just move the characters to where they're supposed to be. But, yeah, this was pretty atrocious. Dorne. What the fuck? What the ever-living fuck? Well, I did say it was going to get worse after the Frey pie, and this is even worse. Remember that line that Doran speaks at the end of his last chapter in A Feast for Crows? Vengeance, justice, fire and blood. In that totally unexpected turn of events that made readers go, oh my god, Doran has been plotting something all along. He's been plotting with the Targaryens. He's going to side with Dany. This is freaking amazing. We had no idea. They stole that, yeah. They horribly misappropriated it. They gave it to that horrible cunt, Ellaria, who should just, you know, be eaten by a dragon or something horrendous as promptly as possible. They gave that to her and to Varys, who, yes, of course Varys is in Dorne, and of course Olenna is in Dorne as well. They use it for a person who's been talking all along about how much she loves vengeance. It's not a surprise that she talks about vengeance. I'm not sure about the justice part, because sure there was no justice in her and those horrible little offspring of hers murdering Doran and Trystane. There was certainly no justice there. And no, they give these lines to her. It's worse than... It's worse than horrible. It's even worse than the Frey pie, because, you know, the Frey pie was a really cool moment, but it wasn't such a character moment as it was for Doran, I think. It wasn't such a huge turn, but they're similar moments. There are these two turns with characters that you didn't think were planning something. In one case you thought that they weren't loyal, in the other case you thought that they were, you know, too weak to do something. And you get these amazing turns. And they steal it and give it to characters who've, in both cases, both Arya and Ellaria, have announced their desire for vengeance all along. It is not a surprise. It's blatant, it's right out there. And they take this. And again, big stabby wounds full of salt. Not a cool nod. Just atrocious, just horrible. Some of the worst things that they have done so far. This is on par with, Karth. This is on par with everything that they've done with Dorne so far. I mean, Dorne has been a horrible misadventure, and this was just the perfect ending to that horrible misadventure, having this reused in such a horrible fashion. And yes, I am absolutely livid, and I would like to call for vengeance, justice, fire and blood, and guess who I would like to impose that on? There's not too much to say about Meereen, really, the final shots. I mean, it is visually impressive, the whole armada, and again, the dragon CGI looks amazing. But, what is that Bars guy doing there again? We just saw him in Dorne, and now he's on Dany's flagship. And that whole fleet looks awfully large. By the way, it's nice that the Targaryen ships, or the reappropriated, I guess, ships from, Volantis and what have you, are crewed by Dothraki sailors. They seem to be doing really well on the sea. They've learned how to sail a ship and everything right away. But, it seems that it's grown quite a bit. Is she supposed to have the whole of the Tyrell and Martell forces with her already? I mean, Varys is there. They seem to have skipped a step there, like, sailing over to Meereen. Or maybe she met them out at sea or something. I don't know. But, she's got a huge army, huge dragons. I guess they're coming to Westeros in a couple of days. We'll finish off with the wall section, even though it isn't actually the final bit, or rather Bran's section. But it does have what I think maybe should have been the final part of the season, actually. It's nice to see that Benjen, when he leaves, he tells them about the wall and that there is magic built into it, its foundation, and it will prevent undead things from passing the wall, so he can't pass to the other side. And that holds for as long as it stands, so I'm guessing it might not be standing by the end of next season, given that they put that line out there now. And then we get Bran going into the weirwood tree outside of Castle Black, and goes back to the Tower of Joy to see the end of that sequence, as most people had expected by this time that they were going to get this now. They changed some things around with the scene that I'm, kind of meh about. Why are there handmaidens there? It's supposed to be just Ned and Lyanna. And why don't they leave what is audible about the final words to just promise me Ned? You can hear a bit more than that. I'm sure that people will be going through that scene, frame by frame, finding out exactly what was said. It would have been clear enough with the child being there. Now, the way they set it up with cutting immediately from the baby's eyes to Jon's eyes, well, they couldn't really have been any clearer, but, that cat has been out of the bag for a long while anyway, really. This episode opened really well. I mean, again, I have to say that the opening is so strong with the music and the direction. Fabulous. Maybe it is because they didn't really have to write much dialogue or tell the characters to do much, but anyway, it was nice. Then, unfortunately, we have the huge clusterfuck that is the North, and the two atrocious thefts in the, the Riverlands and the Dorne sections, which really bring it down to a very low level, all considered. I didn't have that many small eye rolls, to be honest, but I'm kind of counting about 3 or 4 spins. The Frey Pie, the Dorne bit, the huge fuck up with Sansa's storyline and what is she about, and the King in the North moment, and what is Jon thinking, what is Jon doing, what are they thinking, the whole Night's Watch and whatever. It's so 4 spins still take the overall grade for the episode down quite low. Thank you very much. In terms of spoilers, as I said I was going to get back to, well, obviously they, more or less reveal all the details about Jon's parentage here. It's quite clear that Lyanna is his mother. They don't outright say that Rhaegar is the father, but you can actually hear that he says, she says if Robert finds out, he'll kill him. So you have to protect him, Ned. That makes it pretty clear. Other bits and pieces, well, I don't know what to think about Jon as king in the north. I don't think the story is going that way. I could be wrong here, but it doesn't feel like that is where he's headed. Dany, of course, is going to be sailing for Westeros at some point. Anything else, no, of course that's happening. The King's Landing bits might be the most interesting to speculate a little bit about. Is this a case of Cersei, or the writers, when they decided how we're going to solve Cersei's situation, will take a page from The World of Ice and Fire and look at Maegor burning the Sept of Remembrance when he was dealing with the Faith? Did they decide to use that and just pull it in without knowing that George is planning anything similar? Or is it in fact that Cersei will be blowing up the Sept of Baelor or burning the Sept of Baelor, and that George put in the bit with Maegor burning the Sept of Remembrance as a foreshadowing of sorts in The World of Ice and Fire? There are other pieces in The World of Ice and Fire where I have speculated in the past that he may have done this to sort of hint at a future event, or just because he likes to have that parallel when everything is said and done. So I'm certainly not, I think it's somewhat likely that we're going to see the Sept of Baelor going up in flames due to Cersei. So that could be whether that's going to be the end of, a bunch of Tyrell characters, or, and Kevin Lannister for that matter. Less certain about something like that. I mean, Loras is in an entirely different position. I don't know that Marjorie necessarily will be present for a trial at the same time, and so it's hard to say. But it's entirely possible that something similar will go down. Tommen, of course, is not going to be committing suicide by jumping out of any windows. I think he's a little too young and innocent to be taking such a disillusioned decision about how he's too beautiful for this world. He's just too beautiful to live, and the world is so cruel, and he just has to take a nice dive out the window. That, by the way, was a 10-point dive. Anyway, that's it for this season in terms of direct episode reviews. As I mentioned, I do hope to be back with a season overview once we get back from Northern Ireland. And we'll also hope to have time to do more straight up A Song of Ice and Fire videos, which of course Elio will be joining me for.